Just last night, I finished Cixin Liu's Death's End. This is book 3 in the Remembrance of the Earth's Past trilogy, collectively better known as the Three-Body Problem, although that's just the title of book 1. I was struck by a thought that this book is having a bit of a moment. They're everywhere in bookstores. There's a Netflix series coming out, I believe, early next year. Currently, I think on YouTube there's an original Chinese series that's very popular and supposed to be pretty good. A lot of new readers to science fiction therefore may want to reach for these books as their first experience, their first foray into the genre. And I think that's such a big mistake. These books are difficult, scientifically dense ideas here, string theory, building of miniature black holes, interdimensional attacks. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is very difficult to comprehend. I think maybe I got 50% of the science. I'm being generous to myself for sure. In any case, I thought, why not make a video that will highlight some of the books that I think are a better way to dip your toes into the SF genre. So let's just get right into it. These are gonna be in no particular order. Let's start. First on the list, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's one of my favorite science fiction books, but also it was recently tested on 2 brand new to SF readers. My 13-year-old daughter read this book as her first introduction to science fiction and she loved it. She cried, she laughed, we talked about it. It was such a great bonding experience. She could not put it down. I believe she read it till like 1:30 at night until it was finished. She really loved the book. Then we convinced my wife to read it and similar experience. While it was difficult for her at the beginning, there is some science. It can be a bit dense. Once she got into the story, she loved it. There are really great characters in it. One of my favorite characters is in this book. It's a fabulous story and it does feel like proper science fiction. Some books on this list may have some sci-fi elements. This one is a proper science fiction book. High stakes, saving humanity. One human stranded on a ship, something happened. He doesn't remember what's going on. He has to piece back his memories and figure out what is his mission. First contact story, just an incredible book, fun book, mind expanding. You will feel like you've read a proper science fiction book at the end of this read. And listen, my daughter, my wife, they cannot be wrong. If you are new to science fiction, I think this is a great way to start. Next on the list is Ursula K. Le Guin, one of my all-time favorite authors, with The Lathe of Heaven. Now, this is not her most famous book. We have Left Hand of Darkness, we have Dispossessed, we have The Earthsea. Why am I recommending Lathe of Heaven? Well, it's a short book. It's not as philosophically complex as, for example, Left Hand of Darkness. It's got some incredible ideas. It's a quick read. We are faced with a protagonist, George Orr, whose dreams have the ability to change the world. And they do change the world. It's an interesting concept. We have this protagonist who is very meek, very average in every other way, except for the fact that he can change the world. If you could change the world, what would you do? How would you do it? And this book is really interesting in the way it addresses that. Every action that we take has consequences, and they're not always what we assume they may be. So there's a psychologist who is probably a good person, but he's starting to manipulate George's dreams in order to fulfill his vision of the world. Very interesting book. I think it's great book for beginner readers because it's very focused. It's got that one idea and it tells it very well. So it's not all over the place. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of my favorite reads of this year. I read The Lathe of Heaven earlier this year and I still cannot stop thinking about it. So yeah, I think it's a great recommendation. Most great science fiction books will blow your mind with some incredible concepts, ideas that will change the way you view our place, humanity's place in the universe and our future. Many of the same said books can lack some character development as you're reading them. For new readers to the genre, this could be a problem. The book I'm gonna mention now takes care of that. 11/22/63 by Stephen King. Of course, Stephen King. If you've read Stephen, you know his character development is really second to none. You feel what the people feel, and this book is no different. It is a science fiction book because it uses one of my favorite tropes, time travel. We're going back in time to change the future. Great concept in itself, but it isn't the best part of the book. That is really the humanity of it. the characters, the connection, the love story in 11/22/63. So this is an easy recommendation. Science fiction is part of the story. It's not the whole story. It's a great book for beginners. I cried, I think, in 2 places while reading this book. And I'm not what you would call a crying man. So this is an incredible book. It's probably one of my favorite. It's definitely top 3. Stand, It, and 11/22/63. My top 3 Stephen King books I recommend it for new sci-fi readers. Before I reveal the next recommendation, I would love for you to leave a comment down below. Let me know what was the book that really cemented your love for science fiction, or maybe tell me what do you think of the books I mentioned so far. What are you reading now? Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't. I would love that. And now let's talk about the next book, and that is Blake Crouch's Dark Matter. I think this is a great science fiction thriller. So if you love books that are fast-paced, this is a great one to introduce yourself to science fiction genre. It does have some big concept. We're talking about the multi-universe theory of quantum physics, but it's super simplified. The plot is quick. It's a page turner. It's a great book. At its heart, we're talking about a family who's trying to be reconnected, a husband, a father who's trying to get back to his universe and reconnect with his family. Fun book, fast-paced, easy book to read. I recommend it to just about any reader because I think it's a great palate cleanser if you've been reading some dense stuff. It's just a great fun read. It's not my favorite science fiction book of all time by any means, but I enjoyed reading it and I recommend it to beginners. Next, I want to talk about a classic, Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game. This is an incredible story, a classic book. If we take a poll of science fiction readers, I would bet that most of them will put Ender's Game near the top of their list. Probably top 3 overall. So it's a very well-established science fiction book. Big in its scope, we are fighting aliens. A human child is brought in to save humanity. But this book goes way beyond the big ideas. At its heart, to me, it's about loneliness, depression, bullying, trying to find your place in an impossible situation. Protagonist is very young, so this book definitely appeals to young readers, but I think anyone who picks up Ender's Game is going to love it. I think it's really a perfect start. If you're looking for a classic, it's not that old, but let's call it a classic science fiction book, Ender's Game is the way to go. The next book is not an obvious choice. I'm talking about A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. Now, this is a great book for those readers who want to dip their toes into SF, but feel good at the end of the reading experience, feel optimistic, happy, right? It's such a great short read that really packs a huge emotional punch. Cozy with a punch. What do you know? We're on this world called Panga, which is really a stand-in for our future Earth, an optimistic, mostly optimistic version of Earth. And we have this non-binary Timang, our protagonist, Dex, who goes around from town to town serving tea and listening to people's problems. That's their job. Eventually, Dex goes into the forest and meets a robot. And this is really where the story goes. Very poignant, interesting conversations, challenging ideas. I was really reflecting on my life a lot while I was reading this book. Do I need to chase money, chase success so much? What's important in life? Very meaningful, beautiful, short book. And it's the first book in a series. I will admit the second book let me down because Psalm for the Wild Build was a great read. It really made me feel good. And I think any new to SF reader will enjoy the book as well and come away feeling good at the end. And that's important. The next book on the list is one that affected me greatly. It's a book that I still think about. I'm talking about Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. A great book, an easy recommendation for those who have read no science fiction, as the science fiction part in this book is very light. The underpinning of the story is a fictional science that's being used, but other than that, it's just a story about human nature. And it's beautifully told. We have our protagonist, Charlie Gordon, who has very low IQ, I believe like 68. And he is going to go through this experimental surgery that is hopefully going to increase his intelligence. And we're reading the story from Charlie's perspective. He's writing progress reports every day, and we can see how his intelligence increases page by page almost in these progress reports. Very interesting way that this book is told. I really enjoyed the book. It made me sad. It affected me greatly. I think it'll make you think about what it means to be human, how important intelligence is versus just being a good person, versus kindness. It's a paradigm shift as we realize, and Charlie realizes, that things he thought once are no longer true, and the only thing that's changed is his comprehension of those events, and things fall apart, they crumble. This is one to read, so I do recommend it strongly to beginner readers. And also, if you've read a lot of sci-fi but missed out on Flowers for Algernon, I think you will benefit from reading this interesting, touching story. If you're the type of reader who wants to try science fiction but is leery of trying the classics, In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune is an excellent choice. What a great book, beginning to end. I had so much fun with this read. T.J. Klune has this way of telling a story where you care about the characters so much. It's lighthearted, but with dark moments. It's a queer retelling of Pinocchio. There's so many layers here. Such an interesting book. I love found family trope, and this found family is the best. I found my favorite robot ever in this book. His name is Rambo, and he's kind of like a Roomba. He's kind of like a robot vacuum cleaner. Super sweet, innocent, lovely. Just an incredible book, fresh, contemporary, with a great message. I really enjoyed it. I think you will as well. This one is for readers who are new to science fiction but already love fantasy. I'm talking about Dune by Frank Herbert. What have you done? You haven't read Dune yet? You have to rectify that right away. It's such a classic, such a beautiful book, beautifully written. The world building is expansive. It's amazing. Politics, characters, twists, action. This book really has it all. And the setting. Incredible stuff. So if you have not read Dune, but you enjoy fantasy, that's a mistake that you have to rectify right away. And if you love the first book, there is more, and you're a fantasy reader. You're already reading, I don't know, Wheel of Time. My hands are not long enough. I'm reading Stormlight Archive. I read the first two books. I'm staring at Oathbringer, and it's like 1,200 pages. It's intimidating for me. For you, Dune is nothing. Don't even think about it. Read it. Do it. And last but not least, I think we're at number 10. We have come full circle. We started off with Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. We're gonna end with Andy Weir's Martian. This is a great recommendation for those who want to try science fiction but don't want to venture too far out of our reality. So The Martian is very contemporary. It feels like a story that's just waiting to happen. We're flying to the moon. Hopefully we'll be there next year. We're going back to the moon. Mars is not too far behind. So this story feels like our near future, and it is our near future. Hopefully what happens in the book is not going to happen to actual explorers, but it could. And this book is incredible. It's really fun. It's fast read. It's funny also. It's firmly established in science, and there is a bit of science in the book, but I think it's the type of science that any new SF reader will be able to handle very easily. If you've watched the movie, I don't know if you need to read the book necessarily, because the movie is actually good and pretty faithful to the book. But if you haven't, read the book first, then watch the movie. So that's it. Those are my 10 recommendations for new readers to science fiction. Once again, I'll ask you to let me know what you thought of this video, what you thought of the books, what are you reading now, and thank you so much for watching till the end. I'm impressed as always by that, and I'll talk to you next time.